It was a super nice introduction. I actually met Michael just before he went to KCRW, so we have been friends for a long time, which also makes me very lucky indeed. And he asked me to read a story tonight called In the White Night, so I will read that first. Don't think about a cow, Matt Brinkley said. Don't think about a river, don't think about a car, don't think about snow. Matt was standing in the doorway, hollering after his guests. His wife, Gay, gripped his arm and tried to tug him back into the house. The party was over. Carol and Vernon turned to wave goodbye, calling back their thanks, whispering to each other to be careful. The steps were slick with snow. An icy snow had been falling for hours, frozen granules mixed in with lighter stuff, and the instant they moved out from under the protection of the Brinkleys' porch, the cold froze the smiles on their faces. The swirls of snow blowing against Carol's skin reminded her, an odd thing to remember on a night like this, of the way sand blew up at the beach and the scratchy pain it caused. Don't think about an apple, Matt hollered. Vernon turned his head, but he was left smiling at a closed door. In the small, bright areas under the streetlights, there seemed for a second to be some logic to all the swirling snow. If time itself could only freeze, the snowflakes could become the lacy filigree of a valentine. Carol frowned. Why had Matt conjured up the image of an apple? Now she saw an apple where there was no apple, suspended in midair, transforming the scene in front of her into a silly surrealist painting. It was going to snow all night. They had heard that on the radio driving to the Brinkleys. The don't think about whatever game had started as a joke, something long in the telling and startling to Vernon, to judge by his expression as Matt went on and on. When Carol crossed the room near midnight to tell Vernon that they should leave, Matt had quickly whispered the rest of his joke or story, whatever he was saying, into Vernon's ear, all in a rush. They looked like two children, the one whispering madly and the other with his head bent, but something about the inclination of Vernon's head let you know that if you bent low enough to see, there would be a big, wide grin on his face. Vernon and Carol's daughter, Sharon, and Matt and Gay's daughter, Becky, had sat side by side or kneecap to kneecap and whispered that way when they were children, a privacy so rushed that it obliterated anything else. Carol, remembering that scene now, could not think of what passed between Sharon and Becky without thinking of sexual intimacy. Becky, it turned out, had given the Brinkleys a lot of trouble. She had run away from home when she was 13, and in a family counseling session years later, her parents found out that she had had an abortion at 15. More recently, she had flunked out of college. Now she was working at a bank in Boston and taking a night school course in poetry. Poetry or pottery?
Well, wasn't that amazing?
He just likes me.
I like her very much, but she's amazing. I want you all to know several things. One, that story was written in a single night. I mean, I checked to make sure, and it was. This has made people think, because she has this ability to see a story whole and to type it as it occurs as she's watching it, that what Ann Beattie does is easy. And, you know, strangely in our culture, there's a belief that it should be hard. But I think that writing this beautiful and this instinctual should be worshipped, not derogated as easy. Now, somehow, Ann Beattie published just very recently a book called Mrs. Nixon, which people made the mistake, God knows how, of thinking was about Mrs. Nixon. And they reviewed this book and said, this woman knows nothing about Mrs. Nixon. The answer was, neither does anyone else, yes, and that the subject was, how does a writer write a book about someone of whom nothing is known? And how do you build a character and invent her whole cloth and fill her in from the little details you do know? Did anyone say this in a single review? No. Did anyone say it was one of the funniest books to be written in the last 20 or 30 years? No one ever thinks Aunt Beattie is funny. So would you applaud again and show that that story was funny? So from time to time I suffer with my friend Aunt Beattie about living in a culture that doesn't know how to read and doesn't know how to review books and doesn't know how to, accept and allow an artist to have a full life and a full career. I'm talking because I think this is so important, so incredibly important. And now I'll ask my first question, if you'll pardon me. And so tell me, when you do this, I mean, you've described yourself as going and hiding in your room and writing a book about Mrs. Nixon and not telling anybody. I mean, what's going on? Are you getting dictation? Are you, what is it?
No, I would have accepted the dictation. I mean, it would have been a little weird, but it would have gotten written a lot quicker. Really feeling my way into it, not having any idea what any organizing principle was. I spent the year before I started in doing any writing on the book, though, doing research about Mrs. Nixon, because I found out that in reading so many books about her husband, which I did, I got them from the library or wherever I got them, read a bunch of books about Richard Nixon, and I looked up the footnotes for Mrs. Nixon, and sometimes she would be in the book, but it was so unimportant what they'd said about her, or she had said something so slight that they wouldn't even footnote it. So I found myself reading books that were this thick because I was determined to find the mention of her. So finally, I think it began to occur to me that what was interesting was what Michael just said, someone about whom very little was known, but that really I kept seeing her because of my reading. And sometimes I was reading Life magazine. Sometimes I was looking at photographs of her. Sometimes I was looking at the Nixon coloring book. Do you remember that series of coloring books that were illustrated? Many, the Queen of England and Prince Philip, all that, that sort of thing. I was thinking about Mrs. Nixon in context, and I was thinking, as a writer, what do those contexts mean to me? What do they indicate to me? So that often I found myself actually thinking of other literary texts to use as example. So all of that became a springboard into discussing, say, stories by Donald Barthelme or something like that.
It's kind of an amazing book, and they have it in the lobby, and because you would be, indicating that you have interest in a writer whose book was given to historians to review, this isn't the Mrs. Nixon we know of. So why not pick it up and read a truly strange book, as I think that second story is truly strange.